The silent awakening, the Vorthik Dominion, had ruled the Orion Arm for 3,000 years. Their crystalline ships moved through space like predators through dark water, powered by technology that bent reality itself. They had crushed 47 civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, and left their worlds as mining colonies. No species had ever mounted a successful resistance for more than a solar rotation. They believed themselves eternal, untouchable, divine in their supremacy. That belief died the day they found Earth's abandoned defense grid floating in the outer system. Like a graveyard of metal bones, Commander Theises examined the human relics through the sensors of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. The structures were primitive by Vorthik standards, assembled from mere steel and titanium rather than the living crystal of proper warships. They floated dead in space, powered down for what appeared to be decades. His tactical officer, a younger Vorthik named Krell, transmitted his analysis with barely concealed contempt. These humans fled their own system when they detected our approach. Commander, they left behind only these hollow shells and automated mining stations. Cowards like all the rest. Theises felt satisfaction ripple through his consciousness. Another species that chose flight over annihilation. It was almost disappointing. The preliminary scans had suggested humans might offer some entertainment. Their history showed constant warfare among themselves, a promising sign of martial prowess. But faced with true power, they had scattered to the cosmic winds like all primitive species eventually did. Begin the harvest protocol. Strip their worlds of resources. If we encounter any human stragglers in other systems, offer them slavery or death. The Vorthik fleet of 500 vessels moved deeper into the Sol system, their sensors sweeping for valuable materials and any hiding survivors. They passed Mars with its empty colonies, approached Earth with its abandoned cities. Everything suggested a mass evacuation performed in panic, perhaps 50 Earth years prior. The Dominion's forces spread out, confident in their supremacy, unaware that every move they made was being watched, catalogued, analyzed by sensors they couldn't detect. Using principles of physics they had never thought to explore deep in the Oort cloud, hidden in the shadow of a wandering comet, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Revenant. Around her, scattered through the outer darkness, 400 human vessels waited in perfect silence. They had been waiting for 63 years, ever since humanity's deep space monitoring stations had detected the Vorthik expansion toward Earth. 63 years of preparation, of innovation, of turning humanity's greatest weakness into its ultimate strength. Unlike other species who had developed along singular technological paths, humans had explored every avenue of warfare simultaneously. They had learned from their own bloody history that there was no such thing as an ultimate weapon, only the right weapon for the right moment. Admiral, the Vorthik fleet has passed the third marker. They're in optimal position. The voice belonged to Captain James Mitchell, Chun's tactical officer, and one of the few people who understood the full scope of what they were about to unleash. Chun watched the tactical display, seeing the enemy. Vessels spread across the inner system like a disease. The Vorthik's greatest advantage, their reality-bending drives and crystalline hulls, had become their greatest vulnerability. They had never faced an enemy who understood that the best weapon against advanced technology wasn't more advanced technology. It was simplicity refined to perfection. Execute Phase 1. Activate the sleepers. Throughout the Sol system, the dead human structures suddenly came alive. Not with energy signatures the Vorthik could detect, but with something far more primitive and far more dangerous. Magnetic acceleration. The abandoned defense platforms were actually Gauss cannons of unprecedented scale, their barrels stretching for kilometers through space. They fired simple projectiles, chunks of iron and tungsten, accelerated to 90% the speed of light. No energy shields could stop them because they weren't energy. They were pure kinetic force. the same principle that had driven human warfare since the first thrown stone. The Vorthik had 3 seconds to register the threat before the first projectiles struck. Crystalline ships designed to withstand plasma. Beams and quantum torpedoes shattered like glass before hammers. The kinetic rounds passed through multiple vessels, their momentum barely slowed, turning beautiful alien engineering into expanding clouds of glittering debris. Commander Theises watched in horror as 40 of his ships simply ceased to exist in the span of a heartbeat. His mind struggled to process what was happening. The humans hadn't fled. They had prepared. They had turned their entire system into a weapon. All ships' evasive maneuvers. Return fire on those platforms. But even as he gave the order, Theises realized the trap's elegance. The platforms were automated, worthless hunks of metal and magnets. Destroying them would accomplish nothing. The real threat was somewhere else, hidden in the darkness where the Vorthik's advanced sensors, calibrated for energy signatures and quantum fluctuations, could not detect them. His crew worked frantically, trying to adapt their systems to track. Purely kinetic weapons, but it was like asking eyes evolved to see color to suddenly perceive infrared. Admiral Chon observed the chaos with cold satisfaction. Phase 2. Release the swarm. From hidden bases in the asteroid belt, millions of drones no larger than a human fist accelerated toward the Vorthik fleet. They were stupid machines, their programming barely more complex than a 20th century smartphone. But they didn't need to be smart. They only needed to do one thing: attach to Vorthik hulls and explode. The Dominion's weapons, designed to target large vessels and energy signatures, couldn't track the tiny machines. Their point defense systems, calibrated for missiles and fighters, ignored the drones as debris. The first wave reached the Eternal, Conquest's hull, and detonated. Not with antimatter or fusion, but with simple chemical explosives, the same kind humans had used for 1,000 years. Against the crystalline hull, each explosion was insignificant. But there were millions of them, each one creating microscopic fractures, tiny weaknesses that spread through the alien material like cracks through ice. The Vorthik's own reality-bending drives, requiring perfect crystalline matrices to function, began to destabilize. Ships throughout the fleet found their primary propulsion failing, their greatest advantage becoming a liability as drive cores collapsed, taking entire vessels with them, into folded space that snapped back like a rubber band, tearing the ships apart at the quantum level. Theises felt fear for the first time in his long life. This wasn't warfare as the Dominion understood it. This was something else. Something primal and terrible. The humans weren't trying to match Vorthik technology. They were rendering it irrelevant. Every advantage the Dominion had cultivated over. Millennia meant nothing against an enemy that fought with refined barbarism. Emergency transmission to all ships. Retreat to the edge of the system and regroup. But even as he gave the order, new contacts appeared on his screens. The human fleet had revealed itself, dropping stealth systems that had hidden them perfectly against the cosmic background radiation. 400 human vessels accelerated toward the scattered Vorthik forces. They were ugly things, built for function over form, bristling with weapon systems that looked almost primitive. Admiral Chun opened a communication channel, her first words to the invaders who had come to harvest her world. Vorthik Dominion, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. You came to our home expecting to find prey. Instead, you found predators who have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Your technology is superior. Your ships are faster. Your weapons are more advanced. None of that matters. We are humanity. We are the species that split the atom out of curiosity. We are the race that went to our moon in a tin and held together by rivets and hope. We are the civilization that weaponized everything from sound waves to spicy food. And now you've given US a reason to show the galaxy what we do to those who threaten our home. The human ships didn't wait for a response. They attacked with everything humanity had learned in its bloody history. Nuclear weapons, considered primitive by galactic standards, detonated throughout the Vorthek formation, not for their explosive power, but for the electromagnetic pulses that scrambled delicate crystalline matrices. Railguns fired depleted uranium rounds that punched through hulls. Chemical weapons, banned on Earth for centuries, filled Vorthek. Ships with compounds that reacted violently with their silicon-based biology. The humans fought without honor, without rules, without the elaborate codes of conduct that governed Dominion warfare. They fought to win by any means necessary. Asterisk. The burning silence Commander Theises watched his fleet die in silence. Space offered no sound to mark the passing of the Dominion's greatest armada, only the brief flares of light as ships decompressed, burned, or simply came apart. The eternal. Conquest shuddered as another volley of kinetic rounds tore through its port sections. His tactical displays showed a battle that defied everything the Vorthek knew about warfare. The humans weren't fighting ship to ship in honorable combat. They were dissecting the Dominion fleet with the cold efficiency of a surgeon removing cancer. Krell stumbled across the bridge, his crystalline form cracked and leaking luminescent fluid. "Commander, we've lost communication with half the fleet. The humans are using some kind of viral weapon against our computer systems. It's primitive code, but our security protocols weren't designed for anything so basic. It's like trying to stop water with a net designed for asteroids." The Theises felt rage building in his consciousness. How could this be happening? The Vorthek had conquered civilizations that had mastered faster than light travel while humans were still living in caves. They had weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand supernovas, yet none of it mattered against an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the human fleet executed maneuver pattern Delta 7. It was based on Wolfpack tactics from Earth's Second World War, refined through centuries of naval combat and adapted for three-dimensional space warfare. Small groups of ships would isolate individual Vorthek vessels, overwhelming their sophisticated targeting systems with sheer numbers of simple attacks. While the alien computers tried to calculate optimal responses to complex scenarios, human gunners were doing what humans did best, adapting on the fly. Trusting instinct over calculation. Captain Mitchell approached with a tablet showing casualty reports. "We've lost 17 ships, Admiral, mostly to collision damage when the Vorthek vessels exploded. Their chain reactions are more powerful than we anticipated." Chun nodded, her eyes never leaving the main display. "Acceptable losses. Begin Phase 3, Psychological Warfare." Throughout the Vorthek fleet, communication systems suddenly came alive with transmissions from Earth. Not military communications or demands for surrender, but something far more disturbing. Music. Human music from across the centuries. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries mixed with death metal. Children's lullabies overlapping with industrial noise. It was chaos, meaningless to the Vorthek, but serving a purpose the aliens couldn't comprehend. The cacophony made coordinated response impossible. Vorthek commanders couldn't communicate over the noise. Their sophisticated communication protocols overwhelmed by the sheer volume of random data. Ships began firing on each other in the confusion, unable to distinguish friend from foe through the static. The Dominion's greatest strength, their hive-like coordination, shattered against humanity's deliberate chaos. Theises ordered his communication officer to shut down all receivers, but the damage was done. The fleet was scattered, confused, terrified. These humans weren't just winning through superior tactics. They were destroying the very concept of Vorthek. Superiority. In desperation, Dices ordered the deployment of the Dominion's ultimate weapon, a reality bomb that would create a localized black hole, destroying everything within a light hour. It was meant for punishing entire solar systems that resisted too strongly. He would sacrifice what remained of his fleet to ensure humanity's extinction. The weapon powered up, reality beginning to warp around the eternal conquest. Space itself groaned under the strain of physics being twisted into an impossibility. Chun smiled coldly as her sensors detected the weapon's activation. They actually think we didn't plan for this. Hidden among the debris of destroyed vessels, human specialists in stealth ships had been waiting. These weren't warriors, but scientists, physicists who had spent decades studying captured Vorthic technology, understanding its principles, and more importantly, understanding its weaknesses. As the reality bomb charged, they acted. Using equipment that looked like it belonged in a university laboratory, rather than a warship, they began broadcasting a very specific frequency of gravitational waves. The waves themselves were harmless, barely detectable, but they resonated with the precise frequency of the reality bomb's containment field. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The bomb's carefully controlled singularity destabilized, but instead of collapsing harmlessly, it inverted. The black hole became a white hole for a fraction of a second, expelling all the energy it had absorbed back into the eternal conquest. Dices had just enough time to realize what had happened before his ship, along with the remaining 100 vessels of his fleet, was converted to pure energy. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a new star burning briefly in the daylight. Sky before fading to nothing. Admiral Chun stood in the sudden silence of victory. Around her, the bridge crew remained at their stations, professional despite the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. The Vorthic Dominion's greatest fleet, 500 vessels that had never known defeat, had been completely annihilated by a force they had dismissed as primitive. The cost to humanity had been minimal. 23 ships lost, fewer than 1,000 casualties. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement to the entire galaxy. Captain Mitchell was the first to speak. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from dozens of systems, other species that were under Dominion control. They're asking ... They're asking if it's true. If humanity really destroyed the fleet." Chun turned to her communication officer. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Let every civilization in the galaxy hear this. Today, the Vorthic Dominion learned what happens when you threaten humanity's home. We are not an empire. We have no interest in conquest or subjugation. But we are the children of a deathworld, forged in the fires of our own conflicts, tempered by millennia of warfare against ourselves. We have weaponized everything from the atom to the common cold. We have turned killing into science and warfare, into art." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "To those who would come in peace, we offer our hand in friendship. We will share our knowledge, our culture, our dreams of a better tomorrow. But to those who would come as conquerors, know this: we are the species that survived ice ages and supervolcanoes. We are the race that split the atom before we left our planet. We are the civilization that looked at the infinite dark of space and said, 'We belong there.' We are humanity. We are the monsters that monsters fear. And we are done hiding. The transmission ended, and Chun turned back to the tactical display. The debris field that had once been the Vorthic fleet was already spreading, caught in the solar wind. Within a few years, it would be nothing more than a faint ring of dust around the sun, a reminder of the day humanity announced itself to the galaxy not as victims or refugees, but as the apex predators they had always been. Reports began flooding in from across human space. The colonies that had supposedly been evacuated revealed themselves, their populations having spent decades underground, preparing for this moment. Mars base came online, its massive industrial complexes already working to replace the ships lost in battle. The Ghost Fleet had been only the beginning. Humanity had turned its entire civilization into a weapon. Every citizen a potential soldier, every settlement a hidden fortress. They had learned from their history that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the preparation for it. The galaxy had expected to find another easy conquest in the Sol system. Instead, they had awakened something that had been quietly preparing. For this moment, since the first human looked at the stars and wondered who else might be out there. In the weeks that followed, delegations from 17 different species arrived at Earth, not as conquerors, but as supplicants, seeking alliance with the newcomers who had done the impossible. The Vorthic Dominion, reduced to a handful of colony worlds, sent their unconditional surrender. They offered technology, resources, anything to prevent humanity from finishing what they had started. Chun accepted their surrender with the same cold professionalism she had shown in battle. Humanity had no interest in genocide, only in ensuring their own survival. The galaxy would remember this day not as the day humanity won a war, but as the day the cosmic order changed forever. For 3,000 years, the strong had preyed upon the weak, advanced civilizations, crushing primitive ones without thought or mercy. But humanity had proven that advancement wasn't just about technology. It was about adaptation, determination, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. They had turned their supposed weakness, their lack of unified technology, into their greatest strength. While other species had developed along single paths, becoming dependent on specific advantages, humans had developed everything simultaneously, creating a toolkit of destruction that could counter any threat. As the Ghost Fleet returned to hidden bases and Earth's defenses powered down to their dormant state, Admiral Chun filed her final report on the engagement. The battle had lasted less than 4 hours. The war that the Vorthic had expected to wage for years had ended in an afternoon. But the message it sent would echo through the galaxy for millennia. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not with fanfare or diplomacy, but with the silent efficiency of a predator that had finally decided to show its teeth. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what this new player would do next. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other civilizations who had thought themselves supreme began to reconsider their plans for expansion. The age of humanity had begun, not with a whisper, but with a roar that left the void itself trembling. They had proven that sometimes the most dangerous species wasn't the one with the best technology or the largest fleet. Sometimes it was the one that had spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds, turning every defeat into a lesson, every weakness into a hidden strength. The galaxy had wanted to test humanity. Now it would have to live with the consequences. Asterisk.